The more we cling to happiness, the harder or the deeper we invite sorrow. True freedom lies not in possessing joy, but in understanding the opposite of it. Right. So again, I'm welcoming you to this episode of Sapiens Talks, and this is the place where we always challenge perception and we redefine the reality. Right. In today's episode, we explore the profound interplay between happiness and sorrow, questioning how definitions shape our mind and how a personal understanding of loss and gain influences our lives. So, before we start this conversation, I want Robin to say something about the topic we have got to discuss so that people will have more clarity on the same. And in the last video, we talked about happiness and how people can stay in this particular state of happiness and what are the things they need to do and they need to know in order to remain happy because it's quite challenging for people to stay in the same kind of state because we human beings are as we have said many times that we are emotional beings and these emotions are the inseparable part of a life.
Right.
It's quite difficult for us to be in the same kind of state. Oh no, every time. So, but we have such control. We have control to some extent in our hands, and if
Right.
we apply all those techniques and all those all these things, I think being in this state of happiness is not going to be challenging for us, right? Or
Mm.
if not possible to stay in the same kind of state, then we will at least not be getting too much affected by the external forces that we experience in our daily lives. So
Right.
before we go deeper into it, I want you to start throwing some light on on the same so that people will have a bit of clarity on the topic we are going to discuss. Over to you.
O- Okay, good evening and good evening to everyone. So, the theme and the line on which we have started this this very episode is, I think, very clear to all people, in which we are particularly dealing with natural psychology, specifically psychology, and in how many ways we can just by bringing some changes to our psychology can really taste the real happiness. So we have talked a lot about natural psychology. We have also delved into a matter such as how combination psychology affects our overall mind and overall life, right? Now we will try to cover all those aspects of psychology, such as how uh, shaping minds of someone can make people you know feel in their different ways, and how we can regulate it, how we can really tackle these things. Moreover, we will also try to understand the power of words, thoughts, ideas in individual life, because since this entire coverage is all based on psychology, and psychology purely deals with ideas, emotions, words, thoughts, concepts. So all these things will be under radar throughout this particular discussion, and in which our main focus will always be on one thing, as to how you can and how we can make a life more easygoing, more comfortable, and more livable, because in this busyness of life we have certainly lost the track, especially in the name of becoming successful, especially in the course of becoming successful, or maybe in our route towards, uh, just presenting ourselves as some emerging identity. All these things have engulfed a lot of time, undoubtedly. So, therefore, how we can uh, do a bit with this psychology, and in return we can have a lot of benefits from it, so that we could ensure few things which we really deserve and for which we are meant to be here on this planet. As we have dealt with that very concept of natural psychology, affiliating and associating with child psychology is said to be the natural psychology. Why we cannot bring the same psychology, especially when we are growing old or when we have grown old? What actually hinders us to retain that particular psychology again? So we will be trying to target all those points, nuances, so that we could provide you, the entire panoramic view of this psychology, and how just a little bit balancing on it could really produce maximum fruits in all possible ways. So that's what we want to do in this particular video. Over to you.
And when you talked about psychology, we basically mean that we are talking about the nature and the characteristics of the things and the words we use and
Right.
everything. So psychology basically means character and nature of that particular thing, right? So, as you said that when we were a kid, actually, so we didn't have that logic, which we applied nowadays, right? Because we have grown up, we have studied a lot, and we have been in contact with people for quite a long time. So we somehow, because of being in contact with those people, we have. I know heavily influenced by those people's opinions, by those people's ways of living, and we have also developed this at the same time or along the journey. We have also developed our own kind of characteristics, and hence we have lost that natural psychology of ours when we were actually born. So we were completely free, right? But as we grew up, or as we are advancing in this life, we are constantly changing our own that natural psychology, and as a result we have started feeling or experiencing those difficulties in a life. uh, so that's what we are talking about, that how we can retain and how we can stay or continue to be in the same kind of psychology, so that no matter what happens in life, we will not be getting that much affected or negatively affected by everything that happens around us. So as you talked about kids being very happy, but as we grow and we find that people are getting overly stressed, right? They are getting overly anxious, right? And they are getting overly burdened. Actually, they have burdened themselves just because of different kinds of goals they have set for themselves. So no, one thing which we really we which we must acknowledge is that we set goals which are not in line with our psychology, which are not in line with our, or we are not, which are not aligned with our, you can say our own choices, desires, right? Somewhere we have been influenced by other people, right? And we don't know our strengths and we don't know our weaknesses, and just because somebody else is doing something, we also want to do the same, and we want to prove that we are better than others. And that's why we start setting those goals which are unrealistic, right? And that's what is the cause of all those, all that's, all the suffering. So the first thing which we have to talk is, tell me, uh, how our happiness is a source, or you can say reason of our sorrow. Because generally whatever we are doing that to be happy. But when we think that now if I'm going to achieve this, I will then be happy. But when
Mm.
I've achieved that, something else is there which is troubling me. And this is an unending process. This is an unending journey. So what is there which we can do so that we can end this unending suffering? We can
Panicking suffering, right?
continue to be in this blissful kind of in a situation.
Right. Okay, so let me give it a interesting direction, especially for our viewers, to understand this very whole concept. Uh, See, all these things are particularly, prevailing and happening right on our, mental side, which means what we are experiencing, observing, all these things are happening just because of our psychology is active to a certain extent, right? Now, since we are talking about what makes us happy, what makes us dejected and sore, commit sad, I mean, all these things are very variable. It has no one particular reason. It has no one particular, you can say, cause. I mean, which could be held as universal cause that makes everyone happy, or let's say everyone sad. So, since this is very uh, I mean, noticed and accepted in the psychological world. And many psychologists do accept this very fact that people have their different reasons for why they turn to be sad and why they almost, all of a sudden become, happy. And when you deal with this number of reasons, number of causes, then you will get perplexed, confounded. So something which is not, particular, something which is not specific, then it's futile to even deal with that particular thing, because we are dealing with a question about happiness for a reason that we want to have it, experience it ceaselessly. I mean, without having any interruption in that. So therefore, we need to find out a certain cause, certain reason, which could be a universal reason for everyone. It should not be like people must come and have a conflict on that, right? So at least on this part, we have to be very clear and specific. So we will deal with this very first part, and then we'll try to figure out all those remedies and the solutions available. See, human brain is very dynamic. Every psychologist, says this very fixed aphorism that our mind, human's mind, is very dynamic. I mean, it can produce anything. All it requires is that little bit thrust from inside, right? Now, when they say this very particular thing, in what context they are saying it, which is also very important to understand, right? So we are dealing with this very concept of happiness and sad, or happiness and sorrow. Then we need to find out some universal reason. That's what I was trying to say. Now for this we have to be very cautious. So for example, we need to have a certain instrument which could help us ascertain certain things in our life, that yes, this is what that brings happiness, and this is that brings sorrow in our life, right? Now if you go and ask any psychologist, then he has his own definition, and trust me, it works a lot. Why? Because it is done uh, thoroughly. Moreover, it is experimented scientifically, right? Now, what are all these things? We'll try to understand, and then we'll try to find out the solutions and the remedy of this, right? How we can attain this eternal happiness, right? That is what is the major, source, and what is the major, purpose for making this, creating this video.
Mm-hmm.
Now, see, I was, I mean, almost in second or third year. Sorry, not second and third year. Maybe in my master degree, I got to know this very one concept from Bhagavad Gita, which talks about happiness and sorrow, and it was so beautifully designed there. And I think these psychologists have almost a similar way of explaining this happiness and sadness, or the sorrow. What this Bhagavad Gita says on this particular part, he says that we humans are very much evolved in a certain direction. And
Yeah.
what is that direction? That we want to attain all possible comforts and for our life. We want to make this life as much as comfort as we could. That's what the major efforts that we are putting right now, right? Now what is more irony or ironical in this is that we humans not just making efforts to make our life more happy, but at the same time we are not utilizing, or we can say enjoying, the entire scene in the sense that happiness, for example, it deals with numerator and denominator concept. Numerator denominator concept simply says one thing, that we humans have desires, but it further multiplies.
Yeah.
But when it multiplies when you accomplish your first desire, and then it goes on multiplication, one after other. So humans' mind are overall engaged in this process of multiplying desires instead of enjoying those moments on which he has got certain success on the accomplishment of particular one desire. So that's how the thing which is appearing to be is very awful, dreadful. Why? Because on the one hand, we have certain desires in our mind which we really want to, fulfill. Even when it fulfills, we come and start multiplying into varied of, desires,
Yes.
leaving all those opportunities that we had earlier to enjoy our previous victories or the previous accomplishments. So that's how we are building up a stress on us. That's how we are building up so much kind of pressure on us, which is unnecessary. And the same language is spoken by the psychologist. Psychologist says is that your since we are uh, since what natural psychology says that we are happy by nature, so there is not an ounce of or an iota of doubt that we are not happy. Our main purpose is to be happy. Now, just because of the combination of psychology, as we have discussed earlier, too much of reaction that we are dealing with and making from our mind to all these things, events that are coming to us, is all a sole reason for making our life more messy and more unorganized, which is giving us altogether a very, just ghastly experience because, we humans are doing something against our own will. We are conflicting with our own personal psychology, which is a natural psychology in this way, right? So now once we understand these things, which is a very common thing, then we try to practice a certain thing in this way where we can literally, try to make ourselves a little bit way or put ourselves a little bit away from this particular lifestyle. Many people we have noticed in our life that even when they have uh, no such, wealth, no such reputation to enjoy, no such fame in their particular life, but still they live their life with full health, full happiness, and they don't care much about it, right? It doesn't mean that they haven't made any efforts in their life to become successful. They have done everything in their life. But just because of they have realized the exact need for that particular desire and its importance in their life, they have somewhere went beyond you know to many and millions of people which they are not able to do that, right? So this is the line that we have to draw. What is that line? That we have to first identify things, and we also have to identify the worth of that particular thing, to what extent it really means to us. Until we make a complete understanding on it, or develop a complete conclusion on it, we can and we will remain confused and confounded. And remember, confounded and confused mind never bring you happiness at all, right? This is one important thing, right? Many people don't even accept it or maybe acknowledge it, but trust me, I mean, psychologically it's very important. And by the way, I mean, don't we think that these are just mere words, thoughts and ideas and the concepts which are causing us pain? Otherwise, it has no specific identity. I mean, let's say we keep talking and dealing and discussing and debating about success and failures. How many of us even have seen success in its physical uh, existing, object manner?
Because it doesn't
Obviously,
have any physical nature.
yes, we really don't have. No one has this. So when we don't have, so ultimately, what we are doing, we are eventually ending up synchronizing our personal identity or thought process with the identity and the thought process of someone who is sitting at the top, especially in the society,
Yeah.
because we have been influenced by this person, because the certain person has defined a certain event in their life as sounds to be even more natural and more widely acknowledged, and therefore we have like a blind has it given our full support and advocacy to that, and in this way we end up being uh, misery or miserable or suffering from a prideful situation. So that's what happens usually, as I see. And I think if you counter these things and put things into practice in a more rightful direction, there is a possibility that we could really improve our, you know, overall life, especially more better, or especially better than the previous one. I think this is what we can do right now. What do you-
You simply want to say that we don't actually feel happy because we've got something. We get very sad because we are always in the fear of losing that. So we are not able to enjoy whatever we have, and that's the reason that we are not actually able to enjoy. You as you talked about one thing I would love to say that, for example, if suppose I'm talking about a student who has scored 93%, right? But
Yeah.
instead of being happy because he could score 93, he is now sad because he for fell short of scoring 95. So somewhere he is not actually, he's not letting himself or herself be happy because he couldn't be there. So this was actually quite unrealistic, right? One more thing you talked about is that we don't actually we have failed so far to understand the psychology of things. For example, as you talked about, the success, the physicality of success. We Nobody has seen success in
Right.
physical form because it doesn't have any. It is very, you can say, it is very subjective. It has no objective reality. So
Right.
many people talk about success, and they have their own definitions of success. Like some people talk about wealth, some people talk about reputation, some people talk about muscle power, some people talk about this and that, right? So we somewhere start identifying ourselves with those all definitions of people. We have failed to understand the psychology of success, what success is. And this is the biggest reason that we are not at all happy, or we are somewhere struggling to be happy, right? So this was a kind of definition as you talked
Right.
about, right?
Right.
So now we are discussing how definitions shape our mind, because
Right.
definitions, as you talked about, words having enormous power, and they really have enormous
Right.
power. For example, if you suppose there is a boy, right? And there is a, or you can say there is a girl, and they're too young. But if you're using very negative words in front of these young minds, I think they will become very nervous. They'll become very negative, because somewhere you are using negative words for these people. And these words, because they are very powerful, have now infused negativity in them, right? So words are very powerful, and we should try to understand the real definition in those words before we start using them. For example, as you talked about success, so success doesn't mean that you have to be very wealthy, you have to be very powerful, you have to be very reputed, or you can say
Mm.
very honorable person in the
Mm.
society.
Right.
This
Right.
is your own definition. I mean,
Right.
this is the people's definitions. Actually, this is not your definition, and this is not the definition of the word.
Right.
This
Right.
is not the psychology of that word. This is not the nature of that word. Somewhere, because you've been highly influenced or heavily influenced, and you have started identifying yourself with these kinds of definitions. So now you think that if I fail to
Right.
be at a certain level or certain position, I will be a failure then, right? You don't actually try to understand what success really mean.
Right.
For example, if I don't have enough wealth, if I don't have, any position, but I'm living my life fearlessly. I'm living my life, happily. I'm enjoying each and every moment. Don't you think that this
Mm.
is also success?
Right.
Because
Obviously.
somewhere you are feeling very satisfied, right? Because ask those people who are sitting at the pinnacle of their success, are they truly happy? If they are not happy being there, it means they are not at all successful,
Right.
in my view. So these people are actually unsuccessful. So before we understand the true nature of words, we should not be using those words.
Right.
As you said that you talked about success, but I'm adding some other words. For example, if I talk about you know failure, so failure also has got its own nature, and people always ascribe their own definition. They, I mean, ascribe a different meaning to this
Right.
word. I mean, failure simply means that you couldn't do something in your life, right?
Right.
It's not that you are nothing, you have lost your identity. It's not like that. For some people, failure is not being able to reach certain position. Failure is not being able to get rich. Failure is not being able to have power in a life. And so these are the definitions the people have created on their own. And
Right.
who creates these kind of definitions? The people who are wielding power, right? People who are sitting or holding high positions, right? These people, and we are being influenced by these people, so they are molding the society in their own way, because they just want
Right.
to they just want to rule. If they tell you the truth, If they let you know the what the reality is, then they will always fail to rule over you. So that's why they have started creating such kind of definitions of theirs, and this is how they're wielding power. This is how they are exercising power on you, and you are they're treating you as a puppet,
Right.
right? So now you'll tell me that how definitions shape our mind.
Okay, so uh, let's begin this with this particular point. And I really found it very interesting. Since you rightly said, and in fact, it is really the core point which we have to emphasize now and then, because if we understand this very core point, there is a possibility that we can overcome this very idea of influence or this very subject or concept of influence. Because I believe personally that our overall mindsets are very well governed by a certain influence that we have on us. And what is that influence? It is purely something transacting to us from certain high source. Now, this is our overall own personal and individual perceptions, whom we call sitting at higher position or higher pedestal, right? Usually, in simple words, we can say people who are generally widely recognized and people who are well successful. I mean, the definition of success was altogether different, but I'm talking about that people have recognized them. People have given them respect, regard more than anyone has been given by the same society, right? So
Yeah.
they have a certain kind of you can say reputation they enjoy every. So when this category of people, whom we also call an elite section, if they conduct themselves in a certain way in their lifestyle, and when they are easily accessible by the common people, then the kind of relationship that builds up is basically one it's a one directional transactions on one side. So the person sitting at the top does anything will always be ending up influencing the party sitting at the lower pedestal, right? So
Yeah.
that's how the thing develops, that's how the thing happens in the current society. We all know that, but unfortunately, we don't react to that, we don't respond to that more consciously, right? So if someone comes to me and says, successful is one who has this amount of wealth as well as enjoys a certain degree of reputation in the society, or maybe has a good hold over possession, right? As a powerful possession that he could, use it and transacting or transact it and regulate it according to his whims and fancies. And that particular person is known to be a successful person, right? Now, when we listen to these things, we actually cultivate the very same thing in our mind, and then we start living our life the same way, right? This is the point. This is the line where we have to be a little bit, you know, uh, cautious, very much careful as to what we are listening to, what we are dealing with. Because 97% of total are following this particular idea and this particular psychology. People who don't follow this are usually the one whom we known as philosophers, whom we known as someone who has seen the life in their own personal experiences through their own personal experiences. In fact,
Yes.
many big philosophers, even if it is Socrates or even if it is Osho or Jiddu Krishnamurti, many philosophers are known for their individual perception of the world. They don't have certain influence or any influence on them from the people around them, right? Example, I mean Socrates. I mean, this is one of the most uh, you know effective or most powerful story I've ever heard, right? And everyone must know about it. I mean, when Socrates was pronounced with this death punishment of poison, right? So he was asked by the judge to either change his way lifestyle or ready to face this death punishment of poison, right? So he was so, I mean, conscious. He says that I'm not going to mend my ways. I will question things if I find it's questionable. I will raise a question over the validity things that is up to me if I find it is not justifiable, and I will keep doing it at all costs. So there is nothing has to be changed from my side, right? Now
Yeah.
you can go ahead and continue with your punishment. So the punishment starts, and thereafter he was put in the confinement, right? In a dark environment. People around him were very happy for reason that people consider this Socrates as a threat to the society and to those established, well-established, rules and regulations, which have been for for a longer time, right? So he was being seen as a menace to the stability of the society, to those powerful norms and the cultures of the society, cultural beliefs of the society. But there was a section who was a little disappointed of this, and that was the section of his own disciples,
Disciples, yes.
right? And these disciples would go and meet this Socrates every morning with one request: please go and accept the conditions and release yourself from this hell. Then he's always kept laughing. And the time finally came of his execution, right? So when this executioner, almost preparing for that concoction of this, poison, this man was really, I mean, astonished to have seen this Socrates who is about to die,
But he was still
but
laughing. He
laughing.
was still, yeah.
Yes. So, and trust me, what he proved through, and after that, after a few minutes, he was executed with the same, punishment. What was most interesting throughout this episode, throughout the story, is that when he consumed this poison, right? 2 minutes after, he gave a one statement that he says, I am all alive and my 20 or 30% of body
What do
is
you, yeah.
almost collapsed, right?
Collect, yeah.
And thereafter, the second statements come the same, that my 70% body is all collapsed and but I'm alive. And the last statement comes that my 100% body is collapsed already, but I'm still alive. Now, what was the lesson to learn from this particular story? And it is a real thing, as I suppose, right? That he never ever, you know, took a shift from his resoluteness,
Yeah.
his determined, overall identity. He was thoroughly pursuing that, not an idea of fear, not a fear of death could even shatter him from inside, right? That much level of determination and undaunting attitude he carried out. How he was able to do that is a question we have to understand and try to understand what are those surroundings, what are those things in surrounding which he was able to observe, but still he remained calm, cool, maintaining his all composure.
Because
And
he
it is
didn't compromise with his philosophy, which philosophy he had for himself, right? He didn't
right.
compromise with that. At the same time, he was not being influenced by anybody because he knew that what he was doing was right, and that's why he continued.
This is right, but there is also one more thing. He understood it and realized it. There are some inevitable facts in our life, and one of those inevitable facts, and which is called an universal, fact, is that one has to die one or other day.
Yeah.
We all know, but we rarely imbibe this very fact. How many people go to crematory house and to just participate in that all crimination? I don't think even any of those, even a slight percentage of that people would even think that one day they would have to come the same place for the same reason. Some other people would be there crying for him. No one thinks about this and in that way in their life, but this man was able to think in that way. Second important thing, he realized it that me will always alive means I will remain alive even when my body is collapsed. Therefore, he proved it is our conscious that is immortal. Body is obviously made of material or matter, which has to be vanished one or other day, right? So, what is the need for crying and wailing over a certain material things which has a very limited time to survive? And
Yeah.
if people come and ask this question and can't absorb it, they can even go and read from the surroundings how many things they see in their surroundings which are absolutely material, and how longer they could see it, and what is the guarantee of this permanent existence of the particular things that we see, right? So these things, however, are very simple to understand, simple to absorb. But the fact is that out of fear, out of apprehension, out of our personal disinterested, or this you can say something which we really don't like it, for that reason we don't accept it, because we are living in a fearful state, because we can't accept these certain particular facts, right? He did it very consciously, right? And that's what Bhagavad Gita says, right? So we have to be fully aware of those few things, in which death is one of those. Once we accept the death, once we accepted that, then I think there is nothing as such bigger in fear or apprehension that could really, you know, make you retreat from making your positions. What are those things which are making us, you know, withdraw things? Is that our own personal fears, which we have somewhere, you know, I mean, uh, evolved for any of the reasons, right? Just because of we have been so much into imaginations that we have calculated our future of 10 years or 20 years from now, and we are getting concerned what will happen then, or even what will happen to my kids after I die. So all these things I think have no real values, and people who understand these things have always put up a great example in that. However, people are very rare of such nature, but it is also very possible that through a very routine and a very consistent practice, I think this particular state could also be achieved. I mean, why, Gautam Buddha, Lord Krishna, and all these people are said to be unique figure. They may or may not be treated as gods, but something which was unique in them, something which was really different in them, which makes them extraordinary figures, is that they realize themselves to be something which I think many people couldn't, for the reason of fear, for the reason of apprehension. So these things I think we will have to be a little bit contemplative about.
So when you think that you are indestructible, as we really are, we are indestructible, right? And nothing can destroy us. If we don't have this fear, I think we are always, in a state of sadness because we are in fear. We are living in some kind of fear. For example, fear of losing something, because we sometimes think that our reputation is going to be at stake.
Right.
Somebody is going to insult me, or somebody is going to be better than me. So somewhere, you are living in a fearful kind of state, and that's why you have lost, people have lost their happiness. And
Right.
this happiness itself is a kind of a reason for sorrow, as we talked about. For example, as I talked about, I think a few minutes back, I talked about, suppose somebody buys a car. Suppose they buy this Mercedes, so they must have
Right.
spent almost on 7 to 80 lakh rupees, or maybe 1 crore rupee, to buy this car. And they are taking that car to a crowded place. So instead of enjoying the traveling or enjoy the journey in the car, they will be very much afraid of getting, that the car might get scratches because it's passing through the crowded area. The people may hit the car, or it can come into contact with something which can leave scratches on it. So instead of enjoying being there in the car, and
Right.
enjoying the whole journey, or the whole travel, they are just getting sad because the car will have
Mhm.
scratches on it. So the happiness itself is the reason for a sorrow, right? And we fail to understand the
Right.
true nature of it, then we'll definitely be very unhappy, right? So the next thing we have to talk about is the definition, the define loss and gain from personal understandings. As we all know that when we lose something, so that is a kind of loss, and we gain something, then it is a kind of gain. But these two words are not that easy to understand, because
Right.
uh, if it was so easy, then I think everybody would then become, would have become very happy, and they would not be complaining. But what we see in this world is that most of the people are complaining about this and about that, right? They are not at all happy. If we talk to them about their workplace, they have complaints. If we talk about how things are going in their personal life, they will have complaints. If we talk to them about how they're doing in their in
Mm.
their life. I mean, how their love life is going.
Right,
Everywhere, they'll have something to complain about, right?
right.
So it's not that easy that you are just telling the people, defining the words, and it's gonna be quite easy. No. So we have to discuss this uh, definition of loss and gain as per your personal experience. What is it?
Okay, let me ask one question and then we'll try to find out the answer to this questions. And trust me, the response to this question will have an overall summary for this very, topic, the very point that we have raised about loss and gains. I mean, so the question is very simple. I mean, what makes us feel running in loss and what gives us feeling that we are having a profit? People might have the different opinions on that, but let me deal it more, uh, uh, I mean, casually, because some things, uh, some things are very important to be dealt with, not technical, terms, so that we could make it even more, simplified and easy to access to the layman mindsets, right? So when we try to find out what makes us feel that we are running a loss and what gives us this feeling, right? But before that, we have to understand one thing. If you understand this entire concept through a business, then probably we can really understand a lot of things about it. For example, uh, how an entrepreneur starts a business or a person starts a business. This is a very common term. I mean, trust me, I mean, if I have to start a business, probably I will invest some money as a capital into that, right? And will have an expectation that particular investment will give me a return at least more than my overall capital expenditure that I have made, right? And that's how I grow my business. That many people do so, right? This is the overall process. Now, the same thing when we apply to our life, every single decision that we make is our investment, right? So this is our investment that we are doing. Now, in return, what we expect that these decisions to be giving a certain kind of return, an
Then
ex
yes.
an expected return at least, right? Now, let's say this fellow man has invested his decisions, his overall life, his overall efforts and time into a certain activity, and that activity is not worth, you can say, investing. For example, how many times we see our youngsters, right from their early age, waste their entire time, or I can say the word invest their entire time into watching movies, into doing certain unproductive things, which has no particular kind of result to give in return. And they keep doing that for years and years. And after they reach to a certain age, they have a realization as if their conscious has been awakened, that they are completely lost. They are almost failure, because when they see people around them of their age are doing good but they are not, then they start feeling, depression. They start feeling dejected. They start feeling, completely displeased. For why? Because they are not able to cope, you know with those things which are usually easily tackled by same number of people of the same age, right?
Yeah.
Now, the thing which we have to understand, our overall efforts, our decisions that we take today are no less than the capital expenditures, almost similar to capital expenditures. Because in return, we are expecting a certain return to us. If your efforts, if your time are truly worth investing, then you can expect a good results from it. So let's get back to the previous example. If that particular fellow has invested his entire efforts into a certain activity, which was for no sure uh, a good activity, whatever he gets in return would definitely be abominable, would definitely be unacceptable to him, because he has entirely invested his money, his efforts into a wrong activities. Therefore, people say that choose your particular goal, and once you evaluate a particular destination or a goal, accordingly try to make your efforts. There should be this balance must be maintained. Many people don't do that. So the question that we had, what are what is that gain and what is that loss?
Loss, yes.
It is the same thing. It is the same thing. What we call something as gain to us is almost more than the capital expenditure in the name of efforts we have done into a particular process. Therefore, we are calling it a gain. Something which we have done, investment in the name of efforts and the time, our precious time, and that particular expenditure is more than the return that we have or had produced, then in that particular condition, we call it's a complete loss to us. So, in simple words, or in the other words, we can say if we really want to avoid this loss, then make sure the objective or the motto or a particular destination you are being fascinated about as you want to be there in some period of time. And if you have decided to put all your efforts into that, don't forget to evaluate that your efforts at least must be, I mean, in proportion wise, be less than that particular return. If you don't do that, then probably you are going to be, I mean, dejected or disappointed, right? Much like a businessman who has invested 10 lakhs of rupees in a particular business to be having a hope that he will get something bigger as 20 lakh rupees in return, but he ends up getting 5 lakh rupees. So he faces 5 lakh rupees, which was less than the overall expenditures he did as a capital, right?
Yeah,
This is a very common term. I'm using this particular analogy for one reason that our life is no less than a business, right? Whatever decision, whatever the efforts we take in our today's life are going to be the result for tomorrow. We accept it or not. People today are almost ready to accept those activities in particular life or the societies which are absolutely, uh, you know, I think discarded. Why? Because these activities are not seen as activities to be performed by a civilized person, right? For
yeah,
example, we don't expect a person sitting beside me should be a thief or a stealer. A person should not be immoral. These are the things which we don't expect from our fellow members, right? Fellow members. When you have decided to live your life in that way, and still you are expecting something good to come to you as a result, and obviously, the result would be inevitable that you will face loss in the name of losing your reputation itself, in the name of losing certain even bigger thing, which is much precious to you. And then you may feel depressed and disappointed, which is a very common, a routine experience people have. So, what we can say in one word or in one sentence that we have to be very, discerning about our every single see the entire conversation that we are dealing right now, especially on this part, gain and loss is simply about our efforts, our time that we are dealing with right now. Because since we are talking right now, on what purpose we are doing this discussion? Do we have a reason which is bigger than this particular discussion is having? Then our conversation is going to be fruitful and productive because we want and expect something good to come, at least more as a result
right.
to come to an overall efforts that we are making. Only then we will be held as, or we will be called as a great or a successful business. Otherwise, a person who has invested 10 lakh rupees and return he gets 5 lakh rupees, what kind of businessman he is, right? So the simple thing to understand it without doing any further calculation is that make sure your efforts, your time should be well invested into the process. And since you have decided the goal in your life, make sure your actions should be very much commensurate to that particular, destination of the objective. If it is not, then ready to face the loss, but don't be disappointed at the same time because you know your efforts were wrong, your time that you have invested were wrong, and still you are being sad and you are being disappointed. Then it's your overall, you can say, immaturity that you are showing and expressing, and that what makes people do often, right? I mean, how many times you have seen a thief, you know doing penitence for a reason that he has done something wrong, He was doing something wrong right from the beginning. He was
Yeah.
aware of the consequences of it. But at
Yes.
the same time, he is not ready to accept the consequences, the result of it, which is a complete total outcome of it. I think this is very clear thing, and it doesn't need any extra explanation or any extra kind of illustration for people to understand, right?
As I talked about in the last video, that if you can put your hand on a heart and say that I did whatever I could, then rest
Right,
is the mind chattering, right? If the
right,
mind is negative, you will always have something negative. You will think, something negative, and the mind is positive. You will have, what a lovely life I had, right? So it's all about you, and it's all about your effort, because you are the one.
right,
You yourself are know you better than anyone else does, right? Because you know yourself, the kind of person you are, right? I can tell you, just because I've just seen you, I've seen your behavior, through on the basis of that behavior, on the basis of the kind of conversation you have with people, I can project my opinion on the basis of that. But I don't really know you, very well. So you have to know, you have to understand whether you have put in all the efforts in whatever you tried to do. And even then, even then you are facing some loss, then there must have been some shortcomings on your part, right? And that's why you are facing. So this feeling should not be there, actually. For example, I came across one quote that's been I think given by most probably Bruce Lee. He says that I don't fear the man who knows 1,000 kicks, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 1,000 times, right?
mm,
So when
right,
it comes to succeeding in a life, you'll have to put in efforts, right? You cannot dream yourself to be successful just by dreaming about it, right?
right,
So, for example, if we are just having this conversation and we don't come up with anything, that is really worth sharing with people, then I don't think that people would ever listen to us, because why would they waste their time, right? So, as far as success is concerned, it always requires your relentless efforts, right? You have to make relentless efforts. Otherwise, you should be forgetting
right,
success, right? So, gain and loss, this is all about your nature, right? If you think that you have really worked very hard, and whatever I got is in proportion to the efforts I put in, then I
mm,
think there is no need to be disheartened. And if you
right.
think that
Obviously,
you
there is
failed
no need.
somewhere to put in efforts, then you should be again, rising like
Right,
a phoenix, because
right.
now you are ready to do efforts, right? To make efforts. The next thing we have to discuss is, tell me how to identify combination of psychology. We talked about this in the previous video. We somewhere have started combining our psychology with the other psychologies, other people's psychologies, right? And that's why we are, facing such problems in our life.
Right.
As our psychology is to be happy. Our psychology is that we were born free and
Mm,
we had complete freedom, but somewhere we have chained ourselves in our desires and expectations, and other things.
mm.
So this is the problem with us. So now you'll tell me how to identify those combinations of psychology.
Okay, I mean, when I was trying to know, I mean, how we could really find out through a simple process uh, as to what makes our psychology a full of combination psychology, right? And in simple term, we can certainly say this one that when our natural psychology is somewhere missing and it has been overpowered by certain other psychology, which keeps panicking us, which keeps putting us under a certain kind of mindset, which is at least not good and pleasant, that what I can say, can purely be said as a combination of psychology.
Yes.
In simple words, I can say when you act against your natural psychology and you do it out of your own will by making your brain to react to a certain events, right? To that extent that you have completely lost your natural psychology and you are completely enslaved to your combination of psychology, which is all different from your natural psychology. And then you start feeling uh, pain, you start feeling disappointments, you start feeling depressed. Everything that happens to you, it happens on this particular point, right? So, this is the one point which I want to make. The second point is that when we understand how these combination of psychologies are formed, then we can simply experience it even our in our mundane life. How many times we are able to react to certain events, and are we really able to absorb the effect of that reaction on our overall physiology. Physiology is very important. So whenever we get anger, we have certain fluctuations in our blood pressure. When we get anxious, we have certain pulses, high kind of experiences, right? These are physiology, changes, right? That happens. How many times we feel that in our routine life, especially when we react to a certain event, and thereafter we see these kinds of experiences on us, or these kinds of, every time when you feel so, you right away can spot it as you are forming a combination of psychology, which is completely against the natural psychology, because natural psychology keeps your keeps your mind cool and calm, keeps your body and physiology intact, having no change in it in any way. How simple this is if people understand it in that way, right? And once we understand this, that this particular reaction of ours, reflects back as a negative result. What is the need of even making a reaction to that? This is the first question that we need to ask. People say meditative minds are very self controlled and regulated. They don't often react to things. In fact, they don't react to things is only that makes them meditative minds.
Yes.
And anyone can could be, even we could be meditative minds. All we need to practice is that how many ways or on how many occasions we can really stop forming these reactions with different events, with different objects. That is the same explanation given in the Bhagavad Gita, isn't it? Bhagavad Gita says the same thing. It enunciates this very same thing in different words. He says that why don't we form attachment with the thing? Once you form attachment with the sense object, what you are going to face is the suffering itself.
Yes.
Because attachment begets suffering.
Suffering,
How?
yes.
Because when you lose your attached thing, your most favorable thing, what you expect from it as a return? Obviously, pain, suffering. So, what is the need of forming this attachment in this way? Now, the same thing is being exercised by the psychologists in the same way, right? Why do we have to react to things? Why do we have to respond to things and events which we know are obviously reflecting in nature? And it is us who is going to be or who are going to be adversely affected. Now, this is the simple process. Everyone knows about it. But the thing is this: how many of us are able to practice it? It is not like that. No people does it. There are n number of people, and now people are growing in numbers, have put themselves on this particular practice, and they do it, and they get the benefits of it.
Yes.
We can do it on a regular basis, isn't it? Let's say we have certain aversion to a certain activities, then it's better to leave that,
Yes.
because once you go and face the same thing, you will start reacting your brain right to a particular event. Now the second thing comes in. This is also something which we are trying to shirking off, or you can say which we are trying to, just like uh, running away from the sufferings or running away from the challenges. Lord Krishna says the same thing. He says that if you really want to maintain your peace, especially in a troubled circumstances or situation, you keep performing your actions without having a fear or a fear of result or a concern about the result. That's it. When you do your work just the way it should be done, you are free on your part. You are doing good, means you have done your all responsible part, which means you have expressed your accountability check in your ways, right? Now,
Yes.
if we exercise our life in this way, I really don't think we will face any problem. Some people are very very silent, and they can even bear even the most, uh, I mean, uh, I mean, most suffering or the biggest shattering news. They can do it only just because of they have their meditative minds, because they don't allow their mind to react to things, right? They keep themselves calm even under a very hard situation, under harsh condition, and they let it go because they know everything is temporary, right? Everything is temporary. Your suffering is temporary, so is your happiness.
Yes.
So we should not be getting bothered about both the things, right? So that's how things happen. And this formation of psychology, that's what we are talking about, is the same thing, right? Means forming our mind with different things, attaching with different objects, and building up fantasies about it. So all these things should be very carefully dealt with, and if we do that, I think we can stop this combination of forming this combination of psychology, and we can, revert ourselves back to the very position from where we started, right?
Yes, nicely said. As you talked about this formation of psychology with other psychologies. For example, suppose you go on a date and your girlfriend wants something and you want something else, and then what happens if you don't agree with that? Then you'll have a kind of there will be a kind of fight or quarrel, you can say. This may end up in your breakup, right? So
Right,
you should not be forcing anybody
right,
to
right,
to go with your choices, because
right.
we all are no different in terms of our nature, in terms of our behavior, in terms of our choices, because I was born in different conditions, you were born in different conditions, so
Right.
we are born with our own kind of behavior. So for if we get influenced, then we are letting other person change our psychology. If we are changing somebody else, then we are changing their psychology, and these both kinds of things are going to have to give you trouble, some kind of trouble, right?
Right.
Because somewhere you are you're going against your nature, you're going
Right.
against somebody else's nature, and this will end in some kind of trouble. So, but the question arises that how they can then we can cope up with this kind of situation, because we'll have people of different behaviors,
Good,
have people of different characters, and we are supposed to live in this world with all these people.
good.
And how we can get well along with these people, because
Right.
we have to live this life with happiness. And if we fail somewhere, if we somewhere fail to cope up with all these kind of troublesome kind of
Right.
situations, then we'll always have some trouble. So what are the solutions? I mean, I'm reminded of one story, because what happens when you try to change somebody's psychology, when you try to change somebody's nature. So there was a girl, and she was willing to, and she was bent on, you can say, in a way, she was bent on ending this habit of people, because in that particular village everybody used to drink a lot. So she was a kind of social reformer, right? So she wanted to eradicate this kind of thing from that village. So she went there, and then she banned the liquor and the wine and everything. She banned there. But then she came to know that there was a guy who was somehow able to manage to get wine, and then he was drinking there, and somebody informed her. She went there, and then she said that, why do you want to spoil your whole life?
Mm.
You are living in this miserable situation, miserable condition. You would be living in you would be living a very nice life if you were not into this habit.
Right.
Then she started asking him that how many bottles of wine do you drink in a day? He simply said that almost 4 bottles I drink. And she asked him, what is the cost of one bottle of this liquor or this wine? He simply said, whatever. He just said that this costs this much. And then she asked, how long has it been since you started drinking wine? He said almost 12 years. Then she started calculating how much it would come to when she has come, done all the calculation. Then she said that if you had saved all this money throughout this period, that you've been using to buy this wine, you would have bought a Mercedes till now, right? And you are sitting right here. Then what he said, okay, ma'am, do you drink? And she said, no, I don't drink. So what have you come by, come from? So then he said that, do you drink? She said, no, I don't drink. Then he said that, are you coming in your own car? Have you come in your own car? She said, no, I come and I came through this. I came by this public transport. He said that you haven't been drinking, right? Still, you don't have this Mercedes, and you are asking me to have this. How come you don't have this, right? So you should have bought till now. I should have bought,
Right,
right?
right, right.
Then what I'm trying to say is, you cannot change anybody. We're simply giving you
Contra
logic.
relation.
We're
Yeah.
simply giving you logic because the person will not be accepting anything at all, because they are bent on this particular thing, that whatever they do is right. Then how will they
Mm,
be accepting a
mm,
logic?
mm.
And whatever he said was also very logical, right? So we will always have trouble if we are trying to change somebody else, right? So this is what we have to talk. So tell me, our natural psychology is the only reality. How can we retain or regain the natural psychology, and how can we get benefited through it?
I mean, okay, before I start, let me admit this one fact. The story you just narrated gives me a resemblance, much like a concept has been introduced through your story. That is a contra-relational comparison, which we will talk about it.
Yeah.
And I think this is the solution, right, for the problems that we are having, right? Now, since we are dealing with this very idea, how we can, as we have talked about, how we can retain this very natural psychology, right? We have discussed thoroughly about the suffering, the causes of suffering, and the pain, and what makes us uh, feel, you know, sad, okay, and what keeps us, pushing to form a combination of psychologies. We have done all this part, right? So this is one thing which we can now state, making it a base so that we could carry forward the discussion right from here. That it's our combination of psychology which is the entire reason of every problem that we are having, right? So each of us has to admit this very particular thing, that this is our combination of psychology, which is something needs to be targeted here. And thereafter, once we do it successfully, we can really ensure ourselves getting back to the natural psychology, right? So
Yes.
one thing is clear. Now moving to the next part, after considering this very particular fact, which we have diagnosed the problem. See, without certification about a particular decision or disease or diagnosing any disease, I mean, we cannot refer or prescribe any particular kind of treatment. This is all
Yes. This is
reality,
impossible.
right? Much like a doctor does, right?
Yes.
Since we have realized this very problem, that yes, this is a combination of psychology problem, and how we can deal with it. There comes a very important concept that I was trying to say. As we deal with these psychology aspect of our body, we also know what lives in the psychology is nothing but words, right?
Yes.
Concepts, ideas. And these words, ideas, concepts have no specific identity, object identity, physical object identity, right? All we have confirmed about it, I mean, scientifically. Now, since we know all these things, now thing which we also need to understand, that every particular idea has also its other side, which is also known as contra-relational comparison. So, for example, we are dealing with the word happiness, which is which is purely a psychological fabrication, right? Which is completely product of our brain or
Brain.
mind,
Yeah.
right? And which has no specific subjective or objective identity, right? Now, since we are dealing this with happiness, we accepted it. There must be the second contra comparison relation or a particular word which should be connecting these two words. For example, there are two ends, happiness, and the other end would be
Sorrow.
sorrow. So now people say, what is the logic behind it and what is significant about it? In fact, I say it it is something which we need to understand. And trust me, if we understand this whole thing, that one cannot exist without other, our entire problem will be vanished in the next moment.
Yes.
And it is all about a practice. I tell you how. So when we deal with this word happiness, the next contra word comes in, that is sorrow.
Sorrow.
Success begets failure,
Failure.
right? So these are the contra-relationals, comparison, right? Now, since these are contra-relational experience, one can, through his prudent mindset, can absorb and understand it by asking one simple question, that can happiness exist without sorrow?
Impossible.
Can suffering exist without happiness? No.
Impossible. I cannot
Can
experience then. How can I differentiate then?
differentiate? Can light be distinguished in the absence of darkness?
Impossible.
Impossible. So therefore, we call it psychological concept. So many people see. I'm not targeting any religion. Many people deal with the word moksha. Many people deal with the word heaven, hell. What are these? These also the words have no physical objective reality. And since these words are purely of a version of our fabrication, then there should be a counter relational word, which could be making the second side of it, the opposite side of it, right?
Yes.
So, since this is now understood to all, we can proceed our journey on this, understanding the possible practice. Adopting it, we could really uh, produce a lot of benefits from it. Now, the thing which we often deal with is that how we can reduce our happiness, how we can eliminate how we can eliminate our suffering. I mean, this elimination of suffering sounds to be more hyperbolic, but since we have recently talked and previously that suffering exists just because of
Happiness.
happiness, we know happiness, we could know about happiness just because of we are aware about the suffering. Now, on the one hand, we are demanding what, expecting what, elimination of suffering. Can it be possible to have a wish of this elimination of suffering without dealing the word happiness? Or let's say we are wishing this elimination of suffering. Won't you think the happiness will itself be vanished? Because both are coexisting together. Therefore, we are calling it contra-relational, comparison. So there is no particular single individual identity of one particular word. If happiness has to exist, remember it has to be existed only with its counterpart or
Counterpart. Yes.
contrapart.
Counterpart. Yes.
If light has to be existed, it has to be with its counterpart, that is dark. So if we want the light to be bestowed on us, then we have to deal with darkness too. We cannot avoid darkness. We cannot avoid suffering because both go hand in hand. Have you ever seen a person living his life fully blissful, having no distress in his life? Never ever. People are there to face suffering, but it is our way to react. It is our way that actually makes us different from other. How we react and how we respond to this. So first thing which I want to say to all my people is stop saying elimination of suffering because it is impossible because suffering is also a psychological concept, right? And since it's a psychological fabrication, it has its own second and extreme part that is happiness. So
Yes.
if you are wishing elimination of suffering, ready to uh, face or experience this elimination of happiness too, because no single one word could be existing or existing alone on its own or stand alone. It is not possible, right? Now, once we have this clarity in our mind, trust me, how much we can make our life so simple. And thereafter, we will not even demand any sort of these things, which really doesn't matter a lot in life. Now, the next thing which comes out in the mind that it how we can balance this part, since not anyone it is not everyone's cup of tea to deal with this, right? So
Yes.
one thing we have to be very persistent about is that try to form your composure, try to maintain your composure in all under circumstances, right? In fact, one book that is called, Psychology of Everything, that says one simple thing, that Lord Krishna and Jesus Christ or Muhammad and all those, religious figures became godly, figures just because of their balancing, their ability of balancing their own personal temperament, their
Yes.
emotions. Lord Krishna was not at all flinching away from any sufferings.
Yes.
He remains to be, um, undaunting position. He was very resolute on anything. What whatever event, you know, just almost acted upon him, he remained very calm and composure. The same thing was with the Jesus Christ when he was facing this very cruel punishment or cruel death. He kept laughing. He even was wishing good health for their own, for his own culprit who was a murderer.
He said that James Lord, forgive these people
Mm.
because they don't know the right
Right.
from wrong.
And I don't know many people know about this man, Jiddu Krishnamurti. He is a famous philosopher. He has written a number of books. He's much like any other great philosopher. The unfortunate thing about him is that he hasn't written any book, but just because of he had done a lot of seminars. Now all these seminars and his spoken words have been transcribed into particular books. This man proved the same thing being proved by the Socrates. He, after a certain age, I think suffered of cancer, and he deliberately, you know, uh, presented himself before the audience to make every audience, each of them sitting in there, listen to him. That how he could manage his composure, even after knowing that this is particularly has been engulfing him very gradually, and he's about to die. He never lost his composure. He was never found to be anxious. He was never, seen as someone who has almost lost his temper or conscious, right? So, in other words, can we say this, that this is not your success, this is not your wealth, this is not your poverty, this is not suffering. This is your concentration. This is your particular kind of focus ability that makes you, your creativity that makes you, you know uh, a person different from other. And I think these traits were very saturated, almost in those personality who we call godly figures, or who we treat as a godly figures, right? So these things are very simple, but the problem is how we could absorb it and how we could put it into practice to get the maximum benefits out of it.
Yeah, nicely explained. And this is what I want the audience to learn from this podcast, because whatever we talked about is very scientific. And if they put all these things into practice, I think they would be enjoying the happiness throughout their life, and they would not be dealing with these sufferings a lot. They will Sufferings will be there because they are the inevitable part of our life. They are the part and parcel, but they will not be getting very adversely affected because of those sufferings and problems that they might come across. So with this, I'm wrapping it up and wrapping this show up, and I we will be coming with the very nice topic and very enlightening and very informative topic in the days to come. Till then, take care.